The USS Eldridge was not in the area. Neither was any Allied vessel. The American merchant crew aboard the Liberty ship SS Oronce had checked the horizon twice before dusk and found it empty. Just the gray Pacific swells and a sky turning the color of a bruise. Then, at approximately 9 p.m. on September 17, 1942, something broke the surface of the water 200 meters off the port bow. It made no sound. It left no wake. By the time the watch officer understood what he was seeing, it was already beneath them. There was no explosion. There was only a rupture, sudden, total, and impossible to explain to the men who survived it. In every war, there exists a category of weapon that the history books handle briefly, almost reluctantly. Weapons that were too strange, too experimental, or too morally complicated to fit neatly into the grand narrative of victory and defeat. World War II produced more of these than any conflict before or since. While the world remembers the Sherman tank and the B-17 bomber, there were other weapons being developed in secret laboratories and remote testing ranges, weapons that the soldiers who encountered them could not identify, could not prepare for, and in many cases could not adequately describe afterward. Some never reached full deployment. Some were used only once. Some were used thousands of times, and yet history quietly swallowed them. What struck the SS Oronce that September night was a Type 93 long-lance torpedo, not itself obscure, but what made it different from every other torpedo in the war is precisely what made it terrifying and largely forgotten. It ran on pure oxygen rather than compressed air. It left no visible bubble trail on the surface. It traveled at 62 miles per hour, nearly twice the speed of its American or British counterparts, and it carried a 490-kilogram warhead. Allied naval commanders, encountering its effects repeatedly in the Solomon Islands campaign throughout 1942 and 1943, were so baffled by ships exploding without any visible cause that they initially attributed losses to mines. It took 18 months of catastrophic naval defeats before American intelligence constructed a partial picture of what they were facing. By then, over 24 Allied warships had been struck by a weapon whose existence they had essentially refused to believe. This is the story of the weapons that the history books overlooked. The ones built in darkness, tested in silence, and deployed against enemies who had no framework to understand what was happening to them. Imagine receiving orders to fear the weather. In the autumn of 1944, American home defense authorities began receiving reports from the Pacific Northwest that defied immediate explanation. A farmer in Montana reported hearing an explosion in an empty field. A Forest Service lookout in Oregon spotted a flash in the timber that produced no visible aircraft. In November 1944, naval observers off the coast of California reported a large, spherical object descending from high altitude and disappearing into the ocean. The United States government, deeply alarmed, imposed a complete press blackout on all reports. The American public was told nothing. What was drifting across the Pacific, across 6,000 miles of open ocean at altitudes between 30 and 38,000 feet, was the Fugo, Japan's stratospheric balloon bomb. The concept was audacious to the point of seeming fantastical. Japanese engineers had discovered the jet stream, the powerful high-altitude wind current circling the northern hemisphere, and calculated that a hydrogen balloon of sufficient size, carrying incendiary and anti-personnel bombs, could cross from the Japanese home islands to the continental United States in approximately 3 to 5 days, riding the jet stream the entire way. The engineering challenge was extraordinary. The balloon had to maintain altitude automatically throughout its multi-day journey, venting gas when it rose too high and dropping ballast sandbags when it sank too low, all without any human control, governed entirely by a mechanical altitude sensing device. Japanese schoolgirls and women working in assembly halls across the country manufactured over 9,000 of these balloons between 1944 and 1945. Using traditional washi paper laminated in layers with a paste made from konjac potato starch. Each balloon was roughly 10 meters in diameter. Each was a message sent blindly into the sky and trusted to the wind. The United States military's greatest fear was not that the balloons would cause mass destruction. They were not accurate enough for that. The fear was biological and chemical. Intelligence agencies could not rule out that Japan might use the Fugo to deliver plague, anthrax, or other biological agents across American farmland. The ballast sandbags were collected and analyzed with extreme urgency. The sand was traced to specific beaches on the Japanese coast, providing American forces with geographic intelligence about their origin. The press blackout was maintained precisely to prevent Japan from learning whether the balloons were reaching their target. Without feedback, the program might be abandoned. It was abandoned anyway, in April 1945, when the Japanese military concluded the weapon was not delivering strategic results. But before it ended, on May 5, 1945, near Bly, Oregon, a Fugo balloon bomb killed 6 people, a pregnant woman and 5 children who encountered it while on a church picnic in the Fremont National Forest. They are the only recorded civilian casualties of enemy action on the continental United States during World War II. Their names were Elsie Mitchell, age 26, and 5 Sunday school children between the ages of 11 and 13. They died because they found something that had crossed an ocean on the wind, and they did not know what it was. By 1944, Germany was losing the war, and its scientists knew it. What followed was a period of desperate, sometimes brilliant, sometimes deranged experimentation, a race to produce weapons so far beyond conventional thinking that they might reverse an irreversible momentum. Among the most extraordinary of these was the Luftkanon, or acoustic cannon, a device developed by physicist Dr. Richard Wallachek that generated infrasound at frequencies designed not to destroy structures, but to destroy people. The weapon used 2 large parabolic reflectors to focus a beam of low-frequency sound waves at a target. At close range, within 50 meters, the concentrated acoustic energy was theoretically capable of causing fatal organ failure in a human body without any visible mechanism of action. No bullet, no explosion, no fire, simply sound, focused and weaponized, arriving invisibly. Testing records indicate the device was evaluated by German military authorities in 1944, but rejected for field deployment. The range was too limited. Effective lethality required targets to stand essentially still within 50 meters, while a large, slow-to-reposition apparatus was aimed at them. And the weapon's bulk made it tactically absurd on any real battlefield. It remained a laboratory curiosity, a monument to the combination of genuine scientific ingenuity and strategic desperation that characterized Germany's late-war weapons programs. What makes the Luftkanon significant is not what it did, but what it represented. Germany in 1944 was a nation producing weapons designed to win not through firepower, but through concepts, through fear, disorientation, invisibility. The acoustic cannon, the V2, the Horten flying wing, the Sturmgewehr assault rifle, all emerged from the same pressure, the same understanding that conventional weapons were no longer enough. The scientists who built them were not monsters, not heroes, but something in between. Engineers handed an impossible problem and told to solve it before the armies reached the door. Of all the secret weapons produced by either side in World War II, none confronted Allied forces with a more psychologically destabilizing reality than Japan's MXY-7 Oka, and none demanded a more devastating price from its own operators. The Oka, meaning cherry blossom, was a rocket-powered flying bomb. It was also a cockpit. A pilot climbed inside it, was carried beneath a Betty bomber to within range of an Allied vessel, released, ignited the rocket motor himself, and aimed the entire aircraft at the target ship. He could not exit. There was no mechanism for exit. The weapon and the man were the same object. American sailors aboard vessels in the waters off Okinawa in the spring of 1945 described the Oka as unlike anything they had encountered. It moved faster than any conventional aircraft after its rocket motor ignited. The terminal dive velocity exceeded 600 miles per hour, making it almost impossible to intercept with anti-aircraft fire once released. On April 1, 1945, during the opening of the Okinawa campaign, American radar operators watched tracks appear on their screens that behaved in ways standard Japanese aircraft did not. Too fast in the final approach, too precise in their targeting vector, too committed to abort. The USS Manard L. Able, a destroyer, was struck by an Oka on April 12, 1945, and sank in less than a minute. She was the first ship confirmed destroyed by the weapon. Her crew of 340 men suffered 73 killed. Survivors described the impact as categorically different from a conventional bomb. The combination of mass, velocity, and the rocket motor still burning on impact created a penetrating force that tore through the hull as if the ship were made of paper. What unsettled American naval commanders most deeply was not the weapon's mechanics. It was the intention embedded in its design. Every other weapon in the war, even the most destructive, operated on some level of separation between the person who deployed it and the act of destruction itself. A bombardier released and flew home. An artillery crew fired and waited. The Oka collapsed that separation completely. The weapon required a human being to fuse himself to it, to fly the last miles as both pilot and projectile, to become indistinguishable from the explosion that ended him. American naval intelligence officers writing assessments of the Oka program in 1945 noted a specific difficulty: the psychological framework they used to understand enemy weapons, analyze the engineering, predict the deployment, develop countermeasures, did not fully apply to a weapon whose primary component was a man who had decided to die. There was no countermeasure for intention of that depth. The weapons in this story share an unusual quality. None of them changed the war's outcome. The Fugo did not burn American cities. The Luftkanon never reached a battlefield. The Oka sank ships but could not stop the Armada. The Long Lance dominated Pacific waters for 2 years and still belonged to a navy that lost. By conventional military logic, these weapons were failures. Too late, too limited, too strange.